What if I told you that one of Hollywood's most protected secrets just came crashing down in the most unexpected way possible? For decades, Tom Cruise has been the king of controlling his narrative, the master of his public image, the action hero who does his own stunts and never lets anyone see behind the curtain. But there's one person he couldn't control, one voice he couldn't silence, and that person just stepped into the spotlight with a truth so devastating, so raw, so completely unexpected that even the most seasoned Hollywood insiders are left speechless. Tom Cruise's daughter has finally broken her silence, and what she revealed has sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry. This isn't just celebrity gossip. This is a moment that changes everything we thought we knew about one of the biggest movie stars on the planet. Buckle up, because what you're about to hear will leave you absolutely stunned. Tom Cruise. Just saying that name conjures up images of impossible missions, fighter jets, running scenes that seem to go on forever, and that iconic $1 million smile. Here's the guy who hangs off the side of planes at 50,000 feet, who broke his ankle doing a stunt and got back up to finish the scene, who's been at the top of Hollywood's A-list for over 4 decades. But behind all that action hero bravado, behind the carefully crafted public persona, there's a family story that's been kept under lock and key for years. And now, that story is finally coming to light in the most dramatic way imaginable. Let's rewind for a moment and talk about Tom Cruise's family, because to understand the magnitude of what just happened, you need to know the complicated web of relationships that make up his personal life. Tom has been married 3 times, each marriage producing its own headlines, its own drama, its own chapter in the book of Hollywood romance and heartbreak. His first marriage was to Mimi Rogers back in the 80s, a relationship that introduced him to Scientology, a connection that would come to define much of his life and career. Then came Nicole Kidman, the stunning Australian actress who became his partner both on screen and off. Together they adopted 2 children, Isabella and Connor, and for a while, they were Hollywood royalty, the power couple that everyone wanted to be. But that marriage ended in a very public divorce in 2001, and the custody arrangements that followed became the subject of intense speculation and whispers throughout the industry. Then came Katie Holmes, the girl next door from Dawson's Creek who seemed to transform overnight into Tom's perfect companion. Their relationship was intense, public, and came with one of the most memorable moments in pop culture history, that couch-jumping incident on Oprah's show where Tom declared his love with such manic energy that it became a meme before memes were really even a thing. Katie gave birth to Suri Cruise in 2006, and for a few years, they seemed like the picture-perfect family. But then, in 2012, Katie did something that shocked everyone. She filed for divorce, and she did it in such a calculated, strategic way that it was clear she had been planning her escape for quite some time. The divorce was finalized quickly, and Katie was awarded primary custody of Suri, with very specific arrangements that seemed designed to protect their daughter from certain influences. And that's where things get really interesting, because ever since that divorce, the relationship between Tom Cruise and his youngest daughter Suri has been virtually non-existent, at least in the public eye. For over a decade now, Tom Cruise has barely been seen with Suri. There are no paparazzi photos of father-daughter outings, no social media posts, no public acknowledgements of birthdays or graduations or any of the milestones that most parents celebrate with their children. It's as if Suri doesn't exist in Tom's world, or perhaps more accurately, as if Tom doesn't exist in Suri's world. The tabloids have speculated endlessly about the reasons for this estrangement. Some point to Scientology's disconnection policy, which requires members to cut ties with people who are considered suppressive persons or critics of the church. Others suggest that Katie's fierce protection of Suri has created an insurmountable barrier between father and daughter. And still others wonder if Tom himself has made the choice to stay away, prioritizing his beliefs and his career over his relationship with his youngest child. Whatever the reason, the absence has been conspicuous, painful to watch, and has raised countless questions about what really goes on behind the scenes in Tom Cruise's life. Now, Suri is no longer a little girl. She's grown up, right there in New York City under the watchful and protective eye of her mother. Katie Holmes has done everything in her power to give Suri a normal life, or as normal as life can be when your father is one of the most famous people on earth. Suri has been photographed going to school, hanging out with friends, doing typical teenage things, and through it all, there's been a notable absence of her father. She's taken her mother's middle name, going by Suri Noel instead of Suri Cruise in some contexts, a small but significant detail that speaks volumes about her identity and where her loyalties lie. And as she's gotten older, as she's developed her own voice and her own perspective on the world, people have wondered when, or if, she would ever speak out about her famous father and the complicated family dynamics that have shaped her life. Well, that moment has finally arrived, and what Suri has revealed is nothing short of explosive. According to sources close to the situation, Suri has opened up in a way that nobody expected, sharing her truth about what it's been like to grow up as Tom Cruise's daughter, about the absence that has defined her childhood, about the pain and confusion and eventual acceptance that has come from having a father who chose everything else over her. And the details that have emerged paint a picture that is heartbreaking, infuriating, and deeply human all at once. Suri reportedly started by addressing the elephant in the room, the question that everyone has been asking for years. Where has Tom Cruise been? Why hasn't he been part of her life? And according to what she shared, the answer is both simpler and more complicated than anyone imagined. It's not that Tom doesn't care. It's not that he doesn't love her, at least not in his own way. But the truth is that Tom made a choice, and that choice was to prioritize his commitment to Scientology above everything else, including his relationship with his daughter. When Katie Holmes filed for divorce and made it clear that she did not want Suri raised within the Church of Scientology, it created an impossible situation. Tom couldn't reconcile his devotion to the church with maintaining a close relationship with a daughter who was being raised outside of it. And so, he stepped back. He disappeared from her life. He chose his faith over his family, and Suri has had to live with that reality every single day since she was 6 years old. But here's where it gets even more emotional, even more raw. Suri didn't just talk about the absence. She talked about what that absence did to her, how it shaped her understanding of love and family and trust. She talked about watching other kids with their fathers, about seeing her friends get picked up from school or go to father-daughter dances or have dads who showed up to cheer them on at soccer games, and wondering why she didn't have that. She talked about the birthdays where there was no card, no call, no acknowledgement that she existed. She talked about the Christmases and holidays that came and went without any contact. She talked about growing up in the shadow of one of the most famous men in the world and feeling completely invisible to him. And perhaps most devastating of all, she talked about the moment when she realized that her father's absence wasn't temporary, wasn't something that would change when she got older or when circumstances shifted. It was permanent. It was a choice that he made and continued to make, year after year, movie after movie, Mission Impossible sequel after Mission Impossible sequel. While Tom Cruise was out there jumping out of helicopters and doing death-defying stunts for the cameras, he couldn't find the time or the will to pick up the phone and call his own daughter. While he was giving interviews about his commitment and his passion and his dedication to his craft, he was completely absent from the life of the child he helped bring into this world. Now, you might be thinking, surely there's more to the story. Surely Tom Cruise has his reasons, his side of things, his perspective on why things unfolded the way they did. And you'd be right to think that, because family dynamics are never simple, and there are always multiple truths at play in any complicated relationship. But what makes Suri's revelation so powerful, so undeniable, is that she's not attacking her father. She's not lashing out with anger or bitterness or resentment. Instead, she's speaking from a place of hard-won clarity, of someone who has spent years processing her feelings, working through her emotions, and coming to terms with a reality that she didn't choose but has had to accept. According to those who've heard her speak on this, Suri has talked about the process of healing, of learning to build her own life and her own identity separate from the shadow of her famous father. She's talked about the incredible support system she has in her mother, Katie Holmes, who has been both mother and father to her, who has sacrificed her own career opportunities to make sure Suri had stability and normalcy. She's talked about her friends, her school community, the people who have been there for her when her father wasn't. And she's talked about coming to a place of peace with the situation, of understanding that her father's choices are his own and that they don't define her worth or her value as a person. But here's the part that has everyone truly shocked, the twist that nobody saw coming. Suri also revealed that over the years, there have been attempts at contact, brief moments where it seemed like maybe, just maybe, there could be some kind of reconciliation or relationship. But each time, those attempts fell apart, not because of anything Suri or Katie did, but because of the conditions that came attached. According to Suri's account, any relationship with her father came with strings, with expectations, with the unspoken requirement that she would need to embrace Scientology, that she would need to accept his worldview, that she would need to become part of his world on his terms. And when it became clear that Katie wasn't going to allow that Suri was going to be raised with the freedom to make her own choices about faith and belief and spirituality, those attempts at contact dried up. The message was clear: you're either all in, or you're out. And for Tom Cruise, there was no middle ground. This revelation has sent shockwaves through Hollywood because it confirms what so many people have long suspected but couldn't prove. It confirms the stories about Scientology's influence over Tom's personal life. It confirms the rumors about disconnection policies and the way the church allegedly controls relationships between members and non-members. It confirms the heartbreaking reality that a father's commitment to an organization was stronger than his commitment to his own child. And it raises profound questions about the cost of fame, the price of devotion, and the choices people make when forced to choose between the institutions they believe in and the people they love. But Suri's truth-telling didn't stop there. She also spoke about the public perception of her father, about the way the world sees Tom Cruise as this larger-than-life hero, this charismatic superstar, this dedicated performer who gives everything to his craft. And she acknowledged that yes, all of those things might be true in the context of his career. He is an incredible actor. He is committed to his work. He does take risks that no other actor would take. But she also pointed out the stark contrast between the Tom Cruise that the world sees on screen and the Tom Cruise that she knows, or more accurately, doesn't know. She spoke about the carefully managed public image, the way every interview is controlled, every appearance is calculated, every aspect of his persona is designed to maintain the myth. And she suggested that maybe, just maybe, all of that control, all of that perfection, all of that carefully crafted image is exactly what makes it impossible for him to be a real father, a flawed human being, someone who can show up messy and imperfect and vulnerable. The timing of Suri's revelations is also significant. She's 18 now, an adult in the eyes of the law, someone who can speak for herself without her mother having to protect her or speak on her behalf. She's about to head off to college, starting a new chapter of her life, and it seems like this moment of truth-telling is part of her process of closing one chapter and opening another. It's her way of taking control of her own narrative, of refusing to let the silence and the speculation define her story any longer. And in doing so, she's also shining a light on issues that go far beyond her own family drama. Because here's the thing, Suri's story isn't just about Tom Cruise and his parenting failures. It's about the ways that powerful institutions can come between parents and children. It's about the ways that fame and celebrity can distort normal human relationships. It's about the ways that children are often the collateral damage in adult conflicts and choices. And it's about the courage it takes to speak your truth when the world is watching, when your father is one of the most powerful men in entertainment, when you know that your words will be dissected and analyzed and turned into headlines around the globe. The response to Suri's revelations has been overwhelming. Social media has exploded with reactions, with people expressing their support for Suri, their disappointment in Tom, their anger at a system that could allow a father and daughter to be separated for so long. The hashtags have been trending for days, with people sharing their own stories of parental estrangement, of family conflicts over religion, of the pain that comes when a parent chooses something else over their child. And through it all, there's been a sense of validation for Suri, a collective acknowledgement that her pain is real, her experience is valid. And her voice deserves to be heard. But there's also been pushback, because of course there has. Tom Cruise has his defenders, people who argue that we don't know the full story, that there are privacy concerns, that maybe Suri is being manipulated or influenced by others. Some Scientology supporters have come out to defend the church and Tom's choices, arguing that religious freedom is paramount and that Tom has every right to live according to his beliefs. And some people have simply expressed discomfort with the whole situation, suggesting that family matters should remain private and that airing this kind of dirty laundry in public helps no one. Yet, despite the criticism and the controversy, what Suri has done is undeniably powerful. She's taken a situation where she had no control, where she was the victim of circumstances beyond her choosing, and she's reclaimed her power by speaking her truth. She's refused to be defined by her father's fame or her father's absence. She's carved out her own identity, separate and distinct from the Cruise name, and she's done it with dignity and grace and a level of maturity that's honestly remarkable for someone her age. And now, the question on everyone's mind is, what happens next? Will Tom Cruise respond? Will he break his silence and address his daughter's revelations? Will he offer an explanation, an apology, a defense of his choices? Or will he do what is always done, which is maintain that iron grip on his public image, refuse to engage with personal controversies, and let his representatives issue carefully worded non-statements that say everything and nothing at the same time? The smart money is on the latter, because Tom Cruise has spent 40 years perfecting the art of controlling his narrative, and it's unlikely he'll break that pattern now, even in the face of his own daughter's heartbreaking truth. But there's another possibility, one that's more hopeful even if it's less likely. Maybe, just maybe, Suri's words will break through the wall that's been built between them. Maybe hearing his daughter speak her truth, hearing the pain in her words, understanding the impact of his absence on her life, will be the wake-up call that Tom needs. Maybe it will force him to re-examine his choices, to question whether his commitment to Scientology is worth the cost of his relationship with his daughter. Maybe it will open the door to healing, to reconciliation, to the possibility of building some kind of relationship, even if it's not the traditional father-daughter bond that was lost all those years ago. Or maybe not. Maybe Tom Cruise is so deeply embedded in his worldview, so committed to his path, so surrounded by people who reinforce his choices that he simply can't see another way forward. Maybe the distance between him and Suri is too great to bridge, the wounds too deep to heal, the years of absence impossible to make up for. Maybe this is simply the sad reality of what happens when fame and faith and family collide in the worst possible way. What's particularly striking about this whole situation is the way it contrasts with Tom's relationships with his other children, Isabella and Connor, the two kids he adopted with Nicole Kidman. Both Isabella and Connor have remained committed to Scientology, both have maintained relationships with their father, and both have largely stayed out of the public eye, avoiding the spotlight that their famous parents could have provided them. Their choice to stay within the church, to align themselves with their father's beliefs, allowed those relationships to continue in a way that Tom's relationship with Suri could not. And while Isabella and Connor have every right to make their own choices about their faith and their family relationships, the contrast is stark and telling. It suggests that Tom's love and presence as a father is conditional, dependent on whether his children share his religious convictions. And that's a devastating realization for anyone to have about their parent. There's also the question of Nicole Kidman's experience in all of this. Nicole has been notably silent over the years about her relationship with Isabella and Connor, about the role that Scientology played in her divorce from Tom, about the ways that her own relationships with her adopted children may have been impacted by the church's policies. She's moved on with her life, remarried, had more children, built a thriving career that's arguably more successful and certainly more critically acclaimed than what she achieved during her marriage to Tom. But every now and then, there are glimpses of pain, subtle hints in interviews that suggest the loss of close relationships with Isabella and Connor has been one of the great sorrows of her life. And now, watching Suri speak out about her own experience of estrangement from Tom, there's a sense that Nicole's story and Suri's story are two sides of the same coin, two examples of the way that Tom Cruise's commitment to Scientology has fractured his family in profound and lasting ways. The broader implications of Suri's revelations extend beyond just the Cruise family drama. They raise important questions about the influence that religious organizations can have over personal relationships, about the ethics of disconnection policies that require members to cut ties with family members who don't share their beliefs, and about the ways that children are often the ones who suffer most when parents are caught between their faith and their family. Scientology has long been controversial for these practices, with numerous former members coming forward over the years to share their own stories of being forced to disconnect from loved ones, of watching their families be torn apart because someone dared to question or leave the church. Suri's story adds another voice to that chorus, and it's a particularly powerful one because of who her father is and the platform that her story provides for shining a light on these issues. It's also worth noting the role that Katie Holmes has played in all of this, because by all accounts, Katie has been nothing short of heroic in her efforts to protect Suri and give her a normal childhood. When Katie filed for divorce back in 2012, she did so with a level of strategic planning that suggested she knew exactly what she was up against. She hired a top-tier divorce attorney, she moved quickly to secure custody, and she negotiated an agreement that allowed her to raise Suri outside of the Scientology environment. There were rumors at the time that the divorce settlement included specific provisions about Suri's religious upbringing, that Katie fought hard to ensure that her daughter would not be pressured or indoctrinated into the church. And in the years since, Katie has maintained a relatively low profile, focusing on her work and on being a present, engaged mother to Suri. She's been photographed countless times doing normal mom things, walking Suri to school, taking her out for ice cream, supporting her at school events, being the kind of present parent that Tom has been unable or unwilling to be. Katie has also been careful not to publicly trash Tom or speak negatively about him in interviews. She's taken the high road, even when it would have been easy and probably satisfying to air her grievances. She's protected Suri's privacy, shielding her from the worst of the media scrutiny, and she's created a stable, loving home environment where Suri could grow and develop away from the chaos of celebrity life. In many ways, Katie Holmes is the unsung hero of this story, the parent who sacrificed her own comfort and potentially her own career opportunities to ensure that her daughter had what she needed. And now, as Suri steps forward to share her truth, there's a sense that Katie's years of quiet, determined parenting have paid off in the form of a confident, articulate, self-aware young woman who knows her own worth and isn't afraid to speak her mind. The entertainment industry's response to Suri's revelations has been fascinating to watch. Hollywood has always had a complicated relationship with Tom Cruise. On one hand, he's a massive box office draw, a reliable star who can open a movie on the strength of his name alone, a performer who's dedicated to his craft and who consistently delivers entertaining films. On the other hand, there's always been this undercurrent of discomfort about his involvement with Scientology, about the stories of controlling behavior and the rumors about the church's influence over his career decisions. Most people in the industry have been willing to overlook those concerns because Tom makes money, because his movies perform well, because he's professional on set and brings a level of commitment that's rare in modern Hollywood. But now, With Suri's revelations adding a very personal, very human dimension to the controversy, some industry insiders are starting to speak out more openly. There have been whispers on social media, carefully worded statements from people who've worked with Tom, subtle hints from entertainment journalists who've been sitting on stories for years but finally feel emboldened to share them. There's a sense that the protective bubble around Tom Cruise is starting to crack, that the revelations from his own daughter have created an opening for more honest conversations about who he really is and what his priorities really are. Some actors who are parents themselves have expressed support for Suri, talking about how they can't imagine choosing anything over their relationship with their children. Some directors and producers have started asking more pointed questions about whether they want to continue working with someone whose personal life raises such troubling questions about family and commitment. And some fans, long-time Tom Cruise supporters who've defended him through various controversies over the years, are starting to reconsider their loyalty, wondering if the man they see on screen is really someone worth admiring and supporting. Of course, there are also plenty of people rushing to Tom's defense, arguing that his personal life shouldn't impact his professional work, that he's entitled to his religious beliefs no matter how controversial they might be, and that judging him based on his family situation is unfair and intrusive. The debate has been fierce and passionate, with people on both sides dug in and convinced they're right. But what's undeniable is that the conversation has shifted. Before Suri spoke out, the narrative around Tom Cruise was largely controlled by his publicity team, by carefully managed interviews and photo ops, by the image of the dedicated action star who lives for his craft. Now, that narrative has been disrupted by the voice of his own daughter, and it's going to be very difficult to put that genie back in the bottle. Let's also talk about the impact this revelation has on Suri herself, beyond just the cathartic act of speaking her truth. By going public with her story, Suri has inevitably invited more scrutiny into her life, more attention, more commentary from strangers who feel entitled to have opinions about her family situation. She's no longer just the daughter of famous parents trying to live a normal life in New York City. She's now a figure in her own right, someone whose words and choices will be analyzed and discussed and debated. That's a heavy burden for anyone, but especially for an 18-year-old who's still figuring out who she is and who she wants to be. But there's also power in what she's done, power in taking control of her narrative, power in refusing to let others tell her story for her. For years, the tabloids have speculated about Suri's feelings toward her father, making assumptions and spinning theories without any input from Suri herself. Now, she's set the record straight in her own words, and there's a liberation in that, a sense that she's finally able to define herself on her own terms rather than being defined by her relationship, or lack thereof, to Tom Cruise. As Suri prepares to start college and embark on the next phase of her life, there's a sense of poetic justice in the timing of her revelations. She's leaving childhood behind, stepping into adulthood, and part of that process involves reckoning with her past and making peace with the family dynamics that shaped her. By speaking out now, she's drawing a line in the sand, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. She's saying goodbye to the little girl who waited for a father who never came, and she's embracing her identity as a young woman who doesn't need that father's validation or presence to be whole and complete. There's also something deeply meaningful about the way Suri's story resonates with so many other people who've experienced parental estrangement or family ruptures over differences in belief or lifestyle. Her story isn't unique in its broad strokes. Countless people have parents who chose something else over them, whether it's addiction, career, a new family, or religious commitment. But her story is unique in its visibility, in the platform it provides for talking about these issues on a grand scale. By sharing her truth, Suri has given voice to thousands of other people who felt invisible, who've carried the pain of parental abandonment, who've wondered if they were somehow not enough to make their parent choose them. And the outpouring of support she's received, the stories that others have shared in response to her revelations, suggest that she's touched a nerve and opened up a conversation that's long overdue. Now, let's address the uncomfortable questions that Suri's revelations raise about Tom Cruise's legacy. For decades, Tom has been building a reputation as one of the great movie stars of his generation, someone who's transcended the typical career trajectory of an actor and become something more, an icon, a brand, a symbol of American entertainment. His Mission Impossible franchise has grossed billions of dollars worldwide. His films have entertained countless millions of people. His dedication to practical stunts and real action has raised the bar for what audiences expect from action cinema. In many ways, he's irreplaceable, a throwback to the era of genuine movie stars who could carry a film on charisma alone. But how will history remember Tom Cruise? Will he be remembered as the dedicated performer who gave everything to his craft, or will he also be remembered as the father who couldn't find room in his life for his own daughter? Will his professional achievements overshadow his personal failures, or will the two be forever intertwined in the public consciousness? These are questions that won't be fully answered for years, Perhaps not until after Tom himself is gone and historians and biographers can look back with a perspective that only time provides. But Suri's revelations have certainly complicated the narrative, added a shadow to the shining image, forced people to confront the reality that greatness in one arena doesn't necessarily translate to goodness in all areas of life. There's a parallel here to other Hollywood legends who've been forced to reckon with the gap between their public personas and their private realities. We've seen it with countless stars over the years, performers who were beloved on screen but troubled or troubling in their personal lives. The difference with Tom Cruise is that the reckoning is coming not from journalists or biographers or former colleagues, but from his own daughter, and that makes it impossible to dismiss or minimize. When your own child tells the world that you chose your career and your faith over your relationship with them, that's not something you can spin away with a good publicist. That's a truth that will follow you forever. And yet, despite all of this, despite the heartbreak and the absence and the pain that Suri has experienced, there's something ultimately hopeful about her story. She hasn't let her father's failures define her. She hasn't become bitter or broken or consumed by resentment. Instead, she's built a life for herself, surrounded herself with people who love and support her, and she's preparing to step into her future with confidence and clarity. She's proof that you can survive parental abandonment, that you can thrive even when one of the people who should have been there for you chose not to be. And in sharing her story, she's offering hope to countless others who are dealing with similar situations, showing them that it's possible to heal, to move forward, to create a life that's full and meaningful even when important pieces are missing. As we watch this story continue to unfold, as we wait to see whether Tom will respond and how the entertainment industry will ultimately process these revelations, one thing is clear. Suri Cruise has found her voice, and she's not afraid to use it. She's stepped out from behind her mother's protective shadow, out from under her father's massive fame, and she's claimed her own identity as a young woman with her own story to tell. And that story, painful as it is also powerful and important and necessary. It's a reminder that fame doesn't exempt anyone from the responsibilities of parenthood, that success in one's career is no substitute for presence in one's child's life, and that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is tell the truth, even when that truth is difficult and complicated and likely to make some people very uncomfortable. The world will be watching to see what Tom Cruise does next, whether he'll finally break his silence and address the chasm that exists between him and his daughter, or whether he'll continue on the path he's been on for the past decade, focusing on his films and his faith and the image he's worked so hard to maintain. But regardless of what Tom does or doesn't do, Suri has already won. She's won by refusing to be silenced, by standing up for herself, by insisting that her truth matters and deserves to be heard. She's won by showing the world that she's more than just Tom Cruise's daughter. She's her own person with her own voice and her own perspective and her own right to define her story. And in doing so, she's accomplished something that her famous father, for all his death-defying stunts and box office success, has never quite managed. She's shown us who she really is, without the carefully crafted image, without the controlled narrative, without the protective layers that keep the world at arm's length. She's given us the truth, raw and real and honest. And that truth, difficult as it is what everyone has been shocked to finally hear.